Welcome back to part 3 of my letter to my mummy. Mummy, you made me laugh so much the other day when you told me that you were a criminaiki as a child. Auntie Connie calls it karmanaiki. I've never heard this word before. That is clearly a word that became extinct in your lifetime, I guess like many words, but not as many as the words that went extinct during your mother, your great-grandmother, and their ancestors' time. I tried to speak to Auntie Connie and Auntie Joni to work out how one would get appointment to such an important role. No one could really tell me. I wonder if I would have been a criminaiki if I grew up at home. I wonder how I would have handled it. I understand that every family had a criminaiki. I also understand that they were criminaikis for harvesting and slaughter. I'm told that it was an honor to be considered for such a role. Mummy, if you became a criminaiki at the age of 10, then surely it would have been very difficult for you to deliver, say, a cow or a sheep all at once. Did you get help from the smaller siblings? You sounded so proud when you talk about that responsibility. But how much meat would a 10-year-old be able to carry? I'm trying to visualize it. The meat, I know, had to be delivered. There were no fridges in those days. There were no fridges when I was a child in Zuar. At least you would only have had to do it every 11th week. Since Oma Grootjie and Opa Grootjie had 10 children, and each of those households had a turn to slaughter, those houses would have their own criminaikis. I still love it so much that no money exchanged hands. In fact, I don't remember ever seeing money when I was a teenager going on holiday or going home. This system was so efficient that every family member had everything they needed in abundance all the time. No one ever needed to go hungry. One of the highlights of the Christmas season for me was camping at Seweweerspootjie at the waterfall. Then we would leave Zuar completely deserted because that was an annual tradition for the whole village. The best of all the activities was rock painting. I wish I could have given my children that experience. I remember with such nostalgia and fondness the competitiveness between the children of all ages, hanging precariously off cliffs over the water, with parents and grandparents shouting, cheering them on. We children knew we belonged to everybody present. The sound of the rocks banging against each other, echoing over the laughter and excitement of the adults. We would draw figurines, pictures of animals. The competition was stiff. Ach man, mummy. Also, one of the most exciting things about the camp would be getting there before anybody else to check whether your drawing survived the year. During the 18th century, the Seweweerspootjie was used by tax-evading brandy smugglers and ostrich farmers and ostrich smugglers and frontier people. I often used to wonder how many people they killed in those mountains and what happened to those bodies. In those days, we as children saw wonder in the most ordinary of things. I miss those days before Google. Those were the days of great wonder. I learned to be empathetic to every living being in those days. In my opinion, your childhood was idyllic. I'm sure that you had reasons to complain, especially in the 50-degree heat, but I would exchange your childhood with mine. at the drop of a hat. You were born at a time when British Lord Caledon's Hottentot Code of the 1806 and its revisions of 1812 and 1819 was alive and kicking and particularly vicious towards children. The establishment of the mission station was extremely violent towards you. The commanders and their soldiers were then present all the time. Are you aware that you have been terrorized since 1674 and that the terrorization went on for close to 250 years? Mommy, all these things that the elders were whispering about were clearly traumas that the elders were trying to forget and trying to protect us from. Everyone in the village talks about the 24-hour lookout spot behind Green Villa, but nobody wants to talk about how the children were hunted and kidnapped and the reasons why you were hiding the children in the first place. No one ever talks about the killing spree that started in the early 1700s. Surely the elders must have been aware about the Commander van Wyck's 8-day killing spree where he hunted and killed 96 men and took their women and children into slavery, and Van der Merwe, who killed 142 men and took 118 women and children into slavery. Where are those bodies? These reports must have sent chills through the Klein Karoo. Mummy, the trauma of these massacres were hush-hush, but they are traumas that cannot be kept quiet. We have ancestral memories, and we are now experiencing those traumas almost every time we shut our eyes. Do you suffer in silence too, Mummy? Do you fear going to bed at night, like many of us? The Settler boasted about these massacres. It made front page news. Do you sometimes get the chills like me when you are surrounded by crowds of white people? Do you feel white people's savage history when your eyes lock with theirs or they brush against you in public? Do you also sometimes feel paralyzed with fear in public spaces? Mummy, did you know that Oma Mikey and Opa Martinus, Oma Hester and Opa Pieter Sker were in fact indentured laborers and slaves? Did you know that the British Parliamentary Select Committee on Aboriginal Tribes, influenced by those very Christian missionaries who took over our kraals, testimony, considered the Hottentot Code successful in the pacification of your people through the barrel of a gun? Mummy, our family was slaves, serfs, and indentured laborers under both the Dutch and the British rule for centuries. Not much have changed, as you well know, as reported by our very own blood relatives who are working on these farms. I wish I had an opportunity to sit with you, Mummy, and the grootmense to know what it felt like living under the Apprentice Code of 1812, which rendered all our family and all our people slaves and indentured laborers on our own land, and that children were only freed when they turned 18 or upon marriage. Why did you guys never talk to us about your lost land? The other day, you just said quite matter-of-factly, jy ken mos die boere, hulle vat net alles as hulle kom, hulle vat net alles oor. Is that really how you all felt about it? Let them take before they kill us. Is that how you felt? The only thing that was really spoken about, and it was perhaps because it was harder to hide, was the cutting off of lips and tongues should people be found to be speaking our indigenous languages. What did that even feel like, hiding those atrocities? Mummy, in my nightmares, it is clear that there are white predators on big horses with weapons and that I am prey. I spend much of my time wondering what it must have felt like, knowing that you are seen as an animal and that you could be rounded up and decapitated at any time. What do you feel when you hear about man mistaken for monkey and shot, or men forced into coffins? Have you been desensitized by the brutality of the settler? I have not. I often wonder what it felt like for our animals running through the fields trying to escape these vicious white people. But I remember that the Boere were particularly threatening when they arrived in our kraal. The adults used to tell the children, including me, to run and hide. Often the doors would be shut. I remember everyone being very anxious when a car arrived. When I was small, there were no cars in the village, so we could hear the arrival of a car from miles away. Sometimes you would chase us inside. Sometimes you would just shout at us and run into the street. Were the elders scared that we would be taken? Or were you scared that the settler would abuse and humiliate you in front of us? Your younger cousins tell me that the elders didn't even talk to them about those things. But they also knew that there were lots of whispering, and when they tried to listen, they would be told, "Moenie tande tel nie." Mummy, since Zoar was part of a bigger kraal, I often wonder what Oma Mikey and Oma Hester thought as their land became smaller and smaller. You said that Oma Mikey came from Mikey's Fontaine to take care of you after Opa Piet died. She didn't speak when she looked after you because she only spoke this clicking language, kwek-kwek-wap. Is it possible that she didn't want to talk because she didn't want you to learn this doomed language in fear that you would be killed for speaking the language? But I remember that you all could speak this clicking language when I got home. And even now, when I go home, I find myself recognizing strange words that I don't know how to spell, and often I speak words that only people at home can understand. Surely Oma Mikey had to ask permission from her masters to cross the Swartberge, or did she run away in the dead of the night, escaping men on horses without skin? One of the reasons why the koppie behind the house was a 24-hour lookout point, Mummy, was the in-book stelsel. The in-book stelsel meant that the year 17 legalized the enslavement of children as early as 1775. This meant that children could just be taken from you until the age of 25. Mummy, when Oma Mikey was a child, your parents were compelled to enter her into slave labor for a period of 10 years. This must have been unbearable for your groot Oma Grootjie. If parents protested, they would risk having their children posted off to distant farms or even their parents. This inhumane protocol applied mostly to girl children if their parents were disobedient. Join me for part 4 of my letter to my mummy.